Welcome to Business on Purpose, the podcast for hardworking entrepreneurs who drive our economy. I'm your host, Barry Barrett, and as a sales leader and business owner, I understand the challenges that come with entrepreneurship. Each episode, I am interviewing business owners who have faced the same struggles you have. Low revenue, a lack of scalability in their sales force. Together, we're going to explore their entrepreneurial journey and uncover the valuable lessons they've learned along the way. From mentors to advice, we'll dive deep into what has helped these business owners get unstuck and move forward towards success. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned entrepreneur, the podcast is for you. Be sure and follow and subscribe to this podcast as we learn from the experiences of successful business owners and navigate the road to entrepreneurship together. Let's get started. So, want to welcome to the show Elie Goldring. He's an implementer, and he's a good guy. I've met him a couple of times, and every time I do meet him, I'm extremely impressed with him. So, Elie, welcome to the show, and how are you today?
Good morning, Barry. Extremely honored to be on this show and be a part of this journey. And same as you've mentioned, ever since I met you the first time a year ago, I was wowed by your energy and everything about you. And getting to know you through the Monday morning calls and meeting on a quarterly collaboration is something that's really impacted my life. So I'm extremely grateful for that and excited about today's episode.
Yeah, good. I was wowed by you as well. Me and Elie, we do the same thing. We're both EOS implementers, and I also have a sales training business. And you come from that background too. Am I wrong?
Correct. 20 plus years of sales manager, sales leader, director of sales. I've sat in all the seats, and I'm blessed today to sit in a fractional seat as a sales leader as well as an EOSI.
Okay.
And hopefully that serves me the best out of my time and the EOS life.
Good deal. Is that your plan? Who are you a fractional sales leader for?
So fractional sales leader is for a company called Culinary Depot, which I've been a part of for 16 years. And through my journey of EOS and my own vision traction organizer, and that 10-year planning really helped me get clarity and recognize that sweet spot of who I am, where am I, and where do I want to get to, and how I'm going to get there.
Man,
so
that's good news.
Yeah, it's really powerful because so much more is getting done than I've ever imagined, and that light at the end of the tunnel, I see it every single morning, where there were days that I just didn't know how far that tunnel goes and if there is even a light at the end of it. So
yeah,
it's truly amazing.
And sometimes that light is, and I've experienced this, is an oncoming train.
Yeah, correct.
Let's go back. And this show really is about entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders, sales leaders from that specific frame point. Some people that are on, I'd say most people that are on my show are entrepreneurs. They don't see themselves as salespeople. So you're kind of rare as far as a guest where you're both an entrepreneur and a sales leader. And it's pretty much how I describe myself. So I love that. We're kindred spirits. We knew that from the first time we met. And then, so I want you to go back. How did you get your start?
Yeah, so I'll take you all the way back. I was born with dyslexia. At a young age, they didn't have that exact title for it. It was more that just couldn't sit through class, and the class setting was very hard for me. Struggled through elementary and high school, and then moved on to go out and blue collar work. I did summer jobs of lifeguarding and plumbing work, and I got married at a young age and was fortunate to go out to the business world. And with my dyslexia, I saw it as a stumbling block and a bottleneck where I wouldn't be able to be my own entrepreneur. And we have a mind's eye, is what we call it. We see things in a whole different perspective. Today we call it a visionary, but 20 years ago, I did not know that it was called a visionary. And I wanted to go out and use my strengths, and I had this entrepreneurial nag. So I got a sales position and I did very well. We tripled the company in 18 months and didn't see much success after that. The partnership between leadership, myself and owners, didn't have the same vision. I was at 3 paces ahead of them always. It was burning me out. Kept on hitting the ceiling really often. I made a choice to move out and find a new career. I was fortunate to reach out to a great friend of mine, Shalom Potash and Michael Lichter. They are the founder and CEO of Culinary Depot. And in 2004, they have been just launching their entrepreneurial company. And I said, that's somewhere where I think I can fit well. So I joined their company in sales and was fortunate to fast forward, grow a team of 10 people, be a part of the leadership team, roll out the processes within the sales department. And today, Culinary Depot has probably about 40 salespeople, 220 employees, and well over 100 million in sales. We're in 7 states, and that's where I started. So I put all my entrepreneurial spirit and nag into that business and was fortunate enough to be a part of that journey.
Yeah, that's good. 2 things that I took from that. You've got some good company. You've got Walt Disney and Sir Richard Branson in the dyslexia department.
Right. Richard Branson is one of my business mentors that I always look at and follow.
Yeah. I always tell people your mentor doesn't need to be someone you meet. My number one mentor in life, I never met him, Zig Ziglar. If you know me for very long, I will tell you he is the most important person I never met in my life was Zig Ziglar.
Yeah.
And he can mentor you. I'm an ADHD kind of guy. The only problem with ADHD, I tell people, is the disorder part. It's not a disorder. Dyslexia, ADHD, all those things, I think they're misunderstood. They're your superpower.
Yes.
And so when you understand what your superpower is, you cannot be held back. And I always think about it this way and tell people the story is how can you tell someone if someone is ADHD or not? And the idea is to take them to a cabin out in the woods in the middle of nowhere with not much to do, if anything to do. And you say your job is to relax. And if you come back 7 days later and they are on the front porch and they are rocking in their rocking chair, relaxing, hanging out, they do not have ADHD. If you come back in 7 days and they have built an amusement park, they have ADHD.
Right. Very good.
So you really do want to have ADHD if you want to build something great. And I don't know about dyslexia. I can't speak to that, but I'll bet it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So you're describing it. Go ahead.
Yeah. Dyslexia is a learning disorder that not going to get into all the details, but it has to do with the fact that the visual and the oral are not aligned. So when you see something and you want to say it, your mind is not aligned and it's not running on the same pace. So you can't get those words out. And with the trouble of that at a young age, you give up real quick on trying to learn because you're not getting the satisfaction out of it and you're not comprehending it as well. So you just learn from the street. I tell everybody, I learned everything from the street. I learned everything from others. We'll talk about that a little later.
Yeah. And
ADHD for me is a result of the dyslexia. But like you said, I've achieved great heights and achievements throughout my life that I'm very fortunate for. And I recognize only the dyslexia as a strength. Although for the first 22 years of my life, it was a real hurdle. And I didn't see the fortunate part about it yet because of the hardship of school, I would say.
Yeah, this is not it's not an ADHD or dyslexia podcast, but I'd like to sit here for a second because as you're talking, I'd never do the difference. I didn't care about the difference. So I think the difference for me is I didn't get, when I read something, I can repeat it and always could. It's actually how I make a living. It's crazy. I can sit and read a book for 3 hours without getting distracted and be able to execute and remember what's in that book for whatever reason. The biggest difference that I heard was when I was in school and they would say, you need to learn this, and let's call it algebra. I'd go, why? And then I would get distracted because I don't even see the point. And the number one reason they had back then was you're not ever always going to have a calculator handy. And now I just reach in my pocket and I open up my calculator that's always with me. And I'm like, they didn't know. They don't know. What do they know?
Right.
So I see the difference, and I'm like, I've never had that epiphany. So my question to you is, sales is a lot about knowing, memorizing, or lack of a better word, of memorizing, your products and services, a lot of scripts, right?
Yep.
How did you overcome that? How did you learn your presentation with that stumbling block, as you called it earlier?
Yeah. Let me take it back and to one of the questions that you shared with me is that, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Okay, let me answer that. So
you can say whatever you want, by the way. This is the
I'm trying to not. Okay, so that's my dyslexia. The first thing about dyslexia is to recognize it and to understand it. And like I mentioned, when I was 22 and I had my first child, I said, now I'm a dad. Now I got to go out and change something about it, because at some point I'm going to have to help him learn how to read and write. And the troublesome of reading and writing is in English, it's in Hebrew, it's in Yiddish, it's in the 3 languages that I dabble in. So when I did that, I went out and I found this great program called the Ron Davis program. And I sat through a full week of sessions. And for me, it was the most therapeutic fix that I was able to have, because at that point I was already successful in sales and I had already created alternate ways of, like you say, learning and executing. To this point, till today, I don't read and write emails. So I always had an assistant. I've been delegating since day one. Some people don't see it and don't understand it, but for me, it's like first nature. So I always did in-person workshops. I always did trade shows to get my hands on pieces of equipment, which I sold, commercial kitchen equipment. I did factory tours, and I did a tremendous amount of one-on-one with manufacturer reps, because you're right, Barry, I couldn't sit down and read a book to learn all the specifications, all the details. Now, my strength was people relations, just going out and building relationships with people. And that's what I do. So the result was that I ended up having an opportunity to sell them equipment back in the day. Later on, it was designing commercial kitchens. One of the great projects that I worked with was the Morristown Medical Center in New Jersey, where we did a $1.4 million renovation over 18 months. With a hospital of over 600 beds, 800 employees through 24-hour shifts, and there was 0 meals down. That means that the kitchen was functional in operation throughout the entire 18 months of the full renovation. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I was included and brought in to sit with the engineers and scope out how it's going to work, what is it going to look like, how do we need to design it in order to create that. And I don't think you can read that out of a textbook.
Oh, no.
So that's where that visionary piece comes out, and everything that I've learned for the years before that in order to be able to create that. So I think to your answer is, textbooks were always my troublesome factor, only because for anyone who has dyslexia with the learning disability, which everybody who is dyslexic has it to a whole different level. Those that at the young age were able to overcome it because they had the passion, got less impactful hardships, I would say. For me, I was a quick quitter and I didn't put the strong efforts in. I always looked, what's the alternate direction? Where do I hook a left? Real quick, where's a left? And then I went down that road and it was beautiful, and I made it work.
Right.
So I hope that answers
it does.
that question.
my wife is a pediatric nurse practitioner, and she's told me for years, 19 years together, that I had ADHD. And I'm like, I don't know. So I actually did 7 years ago go get tested. And
Yeah,
the doc was, yeah, you've got one of the worst cases.
yeah, yeah.
But
So
at that point, I'd already been successful. And she's like, you have so many workarounds with it. And I'm like, oh, I didn't see them as workarounds. And is that what you said? You had workarounds?
yeah, I had workarounds. So to every block in the road, I needed to figure out in quick time how to get around it or how to get over it. You're talking about getting tested. Back then, about 20 years ago, I went out to get tested too, because that was part of the therapy. I
Yeah.
went out there and put all those pieces on my head and sat through a 3-hour test. And what I learned from that is, like you said, I have the highest level of dyslexia from the
Yeah.
point of the 20 years prior in regards to how I dealt with it
Mm.
and result to where I'm at. And that really taught me so much in regards to you could take control. It's you that has the ability to make changes. And if I would have only made some changes when I was younger, maybe it wouldn't have impacted me in the way that it did. But I'm fortunate. So I'm grateful for every step of the way of how it planned out. I'm healthy in that
Yeah.
perspective.
I've read a lot about people with, I'm a reader. I read
But
30 to 50 books a year.
wow,
I love it. There's almost nothing that I love more than to sit down with a book and underline. And I have a reading chair. So the only thing that I do in that chair is read,
wow.
because I do believe that location matters. And so
Mhm.
if you do something in a location and that's all you do in that location, your mind gets switched on. And that has served me well. I could use a couple more locations, like a listening location. That'd be good. That's hard.
I'm sure your session room is one of your locations.
Yeah. One of the things that people are really, when I was early in my sales coaching and training career, and I like to talk. That's just why I do what I do today. I'm a teacher and I love to talk. But I would train these salespeople, and they would be on the phone call with me listening in. And they would say, Barry, you become a new person. You just listened. You didn't hardly talk at all. You would ask a question and let them roll. And I'm like, yeah, but I had to learn that early, that
Right.
discipline.
Yep.
So when I'm in a session room with a client, it's a whole lot easier. Sometimes, though, I do get into over teaching mode, and that's where I have to reel it back. So that those things happen, right? So one thing that you said earlier is you dabble in Yiddish, Hebrew, and English, and I'm like, how do you dabble in that? That's a lot of dabbling. Tell
Yeah.
me about that.
So English is my first language.
Okay.
Growing up ultra Orthodox in Brooklyn, New York, at a young age, my parents moved up to Rockland County in Muncie, New York, a little upstate outside of Manhattan. And English was my first language. Yiddish was the house language, I'll call it, and what I learned in school. And Hebrew is the script that every Jew needs to learn at a young age in regards to reading and learning. Having dyslexia and having the need to pick up 3 languages probably made it that much more complicated, but I seem to be able to pull through.
Yeah.
And English by far is my strongest language. Yiddish would be the second one, and Hebrew would be the third leg.
That's
So,
good.
yeah.
You know, I only speak 2 languages. I speak English and I speak hillbilly. So those are the 2 that I speak, and I get by just fine. One of the things that, do you know who Rabbi Daniel Lapin is?
I think so.
He wrote,
I think I do.
yeah, he wrote Thou Shalt Prosper and Business Secrets from the Bible. Those 2 books are one of the biggest mind change books that I've ever had. I grew up a Christian. I try to follow those laws, and I learned more listening to him about business, because when you grow up in America, at least from my experience in a Christian household, you start to think that money is not a good thing. being successful monetarily. And I don't know where that comes from, and I don't try to figure out those things. I just knew that when I heard the Jewish point of view in the Old Testament, that it helped me change my mind that it's not a bad thing. And there are secrets. And the one that I take with me that I took from him is God is never more pleased with you than when you are obsessively preoccupied with the needs of his other children. So that is in Business Secrets of the Bible. When I heard that, I'm like, oh, and I know at some level that I was obsessively preoccupied with the needs of other people. But when I think about that, I'm like, and then if you are and you solve other people's issues, then the appropriate response is for you to gain wealth, right? And if someone came to and Elie, if you came to my son and you helped him in a way that no one else did, man, I could not help but to love you.
Right.
And be like, look, what do you want? I'm going to give you anything you want because you helped my son. And that one thing helped me just change my perspective. And so could you speak to the way you sell? And is that, do you see that as right or wrong? If you do see that as right, like what does that mean to you in a sales context?
Okay. I always believe to have a director of sales, a sales manager on top of me. As high as I go in the ranks, I always have someone on top of me that I'm learning from and someone who's holding me accountable. And years ago, I remember when I first started working with him, his name is Max Foster, and he said to me something very interesting, that the closing of the sale is not what gets me excited. And drawing the commission at the end of the month isn't the excitement either. It's the taking on the challenge to recognize the impact that it's going to result. And he's watched me. So it was very interesting because I've never sat down to try to understand myself from that perspective. And that talks very well with you, what you just mentioned in regards to being able to help others in a nutshell. And when he said that to me, I knew that everything that I've done and everything that I'm doing, for me, it was all about what is the impact that it does. One of the categories that I spent 15 plus years is the healthcare industry of providing commercial kitchen equipment for them. And it's a tough market. And people always ask me, like, how do you survive that market? Like, I'm in it for so long. And I said, I get up in the morning and I recognize that I probably helped feed this morning 6 or maybe even at certain points, 20,000 seniors. And that's the way I see it, because when I get into the nuts and bolts of their needs, in regards to perfect something, improve something, change a menu, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing the end result. I'm seeing that beautiful gourmet meal that they're putting in front of that senior. I'm not into that instant sale thing. People have a hard time believing it, but I think that's
don't.
Right.
And you have the end in mind, like habit 2 of Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. And I like that you made that jump. You made the jump past your client to their client.
Correct.
I love that.
So obviously it's great for the purchasing department, to the procurement department, to help him and solve his problem for the day. But it was about the food service operation and the residents that they're serving. Because I know the relationships that I built with directors of beverage, food and beverage, or food service directors, the ones that I have the best connection with are those that I was able to impact the most. Those that recognize the true value that I brought. It wasn't about, oh, great, thanks for the ice machine, thanks for the refrigerator. It was in that moment, no cold drinks. Elie, you helped me create those cold drinks. That was the satisfaction.
Yeah.
Going back also about, you mentioned that in your upbringing, the money wasn't the exciting part, or
it was actually seen in a lot of ways as I love when people call it this, necessary evil.
Right. Getting to meet Gino and his translation of it. It's the shiny stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So when you could take the emotion out and stay true to your core focus, the result is that you'll get compensated well.
Yes.
When you're working with people who you love. So if you work with people who love you, they'll never compensate you wrong. So as long as you can deliver value, it all comes together. And I think that's what helped me, with the grace of God, to be fortunate in that sense of just recognizing the impact that it caused.
Yeah. Zig Ziglar, his whole philosophy, right, was that if you can help enough other people get what they want out of life, you can have everything in life that you want. And he would say some of the things money can buy,
Right.
all the things money can't buy. And he would say, what are the things that money can't buy? Money can buy me a house, but it cannot buy me a loving home. Money can buy me a bed, but it cannot buy me a good night's rest. Right? And he would go down that road, and I'm like, yes. And when you're selling to someone, you are trying to help them, not with and you said it beautifully, not with the ice machine, not with the refrigerator, but they wanted their client, their customer, their patient, right, to experience a cold drink because it makes them healthier. Because I think about it this way: the mind, when it's feeling euphoria or happiness or satisfaction or cared for, gets healthier. That's so good.
Yep.
You're teaching me. I love it.
When you say I'm teaching you, I learned so much about you and from you already. Something that my dad taught me very early in my career, I think right when I started, and he's been my business mentor from the beginning, who I do speak to.
So good. Tell me about that relationship.
Yeah, I have a great relationship. My father is and was extremely entrepreneurial. He's retired today and went through his journey, ups and downs of owning businesses and running businesses. And I learned so much from him. And I still go back to him and ask him for his advice and direction. And I'll discuss something that I've done and I'll ask him for his feedback. And most of the time I'll ask him what's his thought. So I'll discuss something that I'm planning. So it's extremely humble to have a father like that, loving and caring and so devoted for my success. And then to have my mom on my side as my biggest supporter and fan, I feel like I have that perfect parent body that I need to support my vision and to achieve my goals.
Man, that's so good.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things, and you probably don't know this about me, but like my dad left when I was 2. He was gone. I tell people he was gone like last week's paycheck. I tell people feel sorry for the 8-year-old Barry, not this 46-year-old Barry. I'm good now. I've done a lot of work through that. And I love, and I can't remember who said this, but he said, I have just enough disadvantages to be successful. And one of the things, and look, I'm 46. I got an 18-year-old boy and a 14-year-old girl, married to a fantastic, I'll call her the brown-eyed girl. And I tell people I am a really good dad. I don't mean to say it the wrong way, but because of that upbringing, I had a great mother. I have a great mother, but I didn't have what you just said. And I still long for it so much that I had to find people like Zig Ziglar.
Right.
I have a gentleman in my life named Dan Gilly that a lot of people haven't heard of. And he is that for me. I'll call him and say, hey, I'm either struggling with something, I have an idea, or whatever that is. And the reason that I am where I am is because of Dan Gilly. And so I love that. And it gives me hope that I'm that for my son and my daughter. So, man, I appreciate that. And one of the other things is I love to teach people, but I love to learn from people. And everyone has something to teach you. And you have taught me. You are teaching me. And I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm going to share but I went off track about my dad.
Yeah.
But he taught me that if I'll be open-minded, and I never understood it till I read Traction and Rocket Fuel and everything that I found from Gino and all of his other great partners, that create an informed EOS of what it is today, and wait to see what it's going to bring to the world. But what he taught me was that if I'll be open-minded to learn each day from one person that's older from me, I'll grow up to be a healthy and wise old man. Mm-hmm. And that's like almost my first mission, I'm going to say, is to prove him right, in the sense that I'm going to go out there and I'm going to listen to that, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to learn. And then came a point in life where I said, wow, I've learned so much, and people were recognizing it to the point where they started coming and asking me for advice and guidance. And then I said, wow, so you mean I'm able to impact others with it? So I'm fortunate that I have all this in my vessel. How do I go out there? And as Mike Payton says, how do I turn on that fire hose and just give it to others? And I've been fortunate to be able to go out and help and teach and influence and excite others that what they have is truly something unique and special.
Yeah, that's good. That is good. So this is about each one, teach one mentors. And so I love that you have those people in your life, and you've mentioned a lot of people who helped you get here. Let's change gears a little bit. And where in your career have you been stuck in specifically the sales cycle or the revenue, and who helped you get unstuck, and how did they help you get unstuck?
Okay. Going back to the early days of Culinary Depot, I was the first salesman that they hired. So I didn't have a sales leader at that point. We were a real small mom and pop company. And I went to my dad every time I got stuck, and every time I needed guidance, support, or just a listening ear sometimes. Fast forward with that, they did hire a director of sales, and I was extremely blessed because he was that go-to. At that point, I was already a sales leader. I had a sales team underneath me. I had 3 people in-house sales, 1 person out on the road. And he was the go-to person. And I think people were watching me from in Culinary Depot to see, how's Elie going to work with Max? Like, how's that going to work? Because Elie's been with the company 12 years or 10 years prior to Max coming in. And how's that going to transition? And all I can say is that Max has been such a great support and such a great asset to the company, that he's been there for that exact reason. How does he get me unstuck? Today, he's all about making sure I can execute that vision. So he's one step ahead to make sure that I have the tools and the support to be able to achieve those goals. But at the early stage, or at the beginning of my career, it was my dad. And then as the company grew, that they had that director of sales that I was able to go into and talk it all out, get past it, recognize what the issue is. We didn't IDS things back then, but we did similar talks in order to be able to get past that.
Yeah, I love that. That's so good. So one of the things now is, where are your next steps? Who are you mentoring now?
I have a split career, like I call it. So it's a 70-30 split. I have very clear days on my calendar that is focused on work and personal days, which are family and holidays. With that being said, I have a goal to be able to teach and help onboard 25 salespeople on the Culinary Depot side within our 3-year picture. And on my EOS side, my 3-year picture is to engage and actively be working with 21 clients at that time. So for this year, it's max 9 clients. At that point, I want to be at 21.
Good for you.
But you used a very interesting word, which I want to touch on for a minute, which was mentor. Who am I going to mentor?
Yeah.
And as we know, and many of your audience that are going to be watching this podcast know, that there's the ability to self-implement EOS with just reading the traction book for non-target market clients. So a new startup of 2 employees or 7 employees under $1 million of revenue, and being where I'm at with my network. And we didn't talk about the charity and other things. We'll get to that soon.
Yeah.
When I found EOS and I decided to become an EOS implementer, I was really in a place that I was looking to fill my nag, in the sense of a piece of my passion and my mission. And when I found it, it was so clear to me that this is going to help that. And that was to help other people. And for my core focus, it's being successful by helping others be successful.
That's so good.
Okay, so that's my purpose.
That's good.
And my passion.
Yeah, that's good.
So I actually have a EOS mentorship that I do with small business owners on a quarterly basis that I'll give them between 30 and 90 minutes of my time, depending on how much time I have that quarter.
Yeah.
As long as they read the book, they fill out their own VTO, and then I'll support them at no charge. And I'm hoping I'm not going to get too big of an influx. Limited spots.
You get to choose, right? You're the buyer.
I get to choose, yes.
Yeah.
And it has to fit into that vision of mine.
That's right.
But I get to mentor them and help them clarify and how to recognize how to utilize those tools.
Yep.
And they adapt on their own speed, each tool based on what they're learning. And I'm here to mentor them. Yeah. So that's my mentorship in regards to helping me achieve that impact that I want to help so many people. So it's 25 people at the Culinary Depot stage, which will impact thousands of people, their families, and everybody that they're helping. Yeah. And on the EOS side, for target market, the clients and the leadership team, I come out of a session, my wife says I have more energy than I went into them. And we know that they're tired. You can get wiped, especially one of my sessions were 13 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was fortunate to have a focus day of 13 hours with my second client. And I come out of that pumped.
Yeah. That's
and that's in regards to mentorship. So I have all these different calibers of where I want to be in regards to helping people.
I love it. So there are 3 stages of business. There's a startup, there's a growth stage, and then there's a scaling stage. So we're going to start with the startup. Somebody is starting a business, they're early on in their journey. What advice are you going to give them?
What advice am I going to give them today?
They're starting their business.
Yep.
Or they're really early, say their first year. What advice are you going to give them in this first stage?
In the first stage, I will ask him to make sure that he has clarity in regards to who he is and where he's at in order for him to really understand where he wants to get to.
Yeah, I love that. Good. So now this entrepreneur, business owner is 5 to 15 years in. They're in their growth stage, they're growing. What advice would you give them now?
My number one advice is to delegate. I've been a delegator from day one. I've seen the success and the ability to help others and help myself. So I would say that when they're starting and at the point of growth, it's delegation. It's all about delegating. And we in EOS say delegate and elevate, which was also such an eye-opener because I would delegate and not necessarily get elevated. I would stay sometimes in that same spot and maybe grow in the width versus growing in the height.
That's so good.
I think it's
deeper, wider. Yeah.
Exactly. Deeper and not wider.
Yeah.
So I think for today, it's the delegate and elevate. And I have probably shared that delegate and elevate tool with almost 1,000 people in my first year. Because wherever I go in trade shows and stuff, that's one of my pieces of business card that I give people. Yeah. I said, if you want to learn more about this, here's it's got my information on the bottom of it.
Yeah, I look at it's deeper and wider, right? You said width.
Yep.
If you think about the root of a tree, you have to grow those roots. The bigger the tree is designed to be, the taller, uh, the heavier, the more the root system grows deeper and wider.
Correct.
And a tree or anything can't outgrow its roots. And that's what you're talking about in the growth stage, right? You have
Correct.
got to set that. Now you're going to give advice to someone who is scaling, because you guys took your business to 7 states, I heard. That's scalability. Tell us the advice to go from growth and then through scalability.
Yeah. So I think for us, it was staying very focused on who it is that we're trying to impact and recognize that they'll be the best resources of. The other great thing that I think when I look back is that the fact that we were a small company, we primarily dealt with other small companies. It was very hard to get into the big chains and to the big hotels and things like that. And the fortunate part was that those small companies were fortunate to grow as well. So I think we just recognized the rapid growth and the success of our clients, and we just made sure to stay apart in the sense of up to par, up to par with that, and constantly being one step ahead. We were very focused on education. So going out and getting trained and knowing like you said, the material, the script, and making sure that we're adding value.
I love it. That is so good. All right, so good. Now, one of the last things I'll ask, is there anything from me in a sales scenario right now that you're dealing with that you might be stuck on that you would need some help with?
So I think for me right now, it's the challenge in regards to how much time do you focus on growth in the sense of mentoring others and helping salespeople, and how much time and resources do you put in to go out and find clients, building new relationships, or making sure that you're spending enough time. So I think that's that's probably somewhere where I can use.
And you know, and I know we don't do theory.
Right.
We do practical advice. And one of the things that one of my teachers that I paid told me when I was trying to go from where I was to where I am today, and I'll frame it up. I was a sales trainer who wanted to create his own sales training company. This is pre-EOS. And I was making a really good 6-figure income being a sales trainer for another company.
Sure.
And he said, listen, you don't want to jump off the boat in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the lake. What you want to do is bring the boat really close to the pier so you can step off the boat. And that got my mind thinking, how do I do that? And so I looked at percentage of time, and I said, my job, I get paid over here. And the beauty of what I did is I was always a straight commission person. So my pay raise was effective when I was. And so I didn't have to worry about, in my mind, that I was not doing for that company what I was getting paid to do, because I was only getting paid on
Commission.
value that I bring.
Right.
So I didn't need to feel guilty. And I was a 1099, so I wasn't an employee either. And so you can't make a 1099 do anything. Now, I loved that person. I loved that company. So I was doing right by them. That was number one. What is right for them? And if you're getting paid on a base salary of any kind, you, in my opinion, you owe it to your employer while you're trying to build this new gig to ask them that question. how much time, and they might say, look, after hours, before hours, right? So I'm like, okay, that's my parameters, because I tell my kids this: if someone pays you, they now control what you do. That's why I love being an entrepreneur, because I pay myself and I control what I do. And Dan Sullivan says, always be the buyer. That doesn't necessarily mean you're the check writer. So in that situation, there should be 2 buyers and 1 check writer. But you can always be the buyer by making a decision whether you want to engage in that or not. And so I was slowly pulling my boat toward this new peer. And so when I got the equal revenue, I completely dropped the other revenue, knowing that I could double this revenue with the same or more effort. And so how do you divide out your time? Number one, if your fiduciary responsibility to someone, and I know that word really well, right? Fiduciary, meaning someone pays you, you have a fiduciary obligation to them to execute on what they want. In the beginning of this, anything new, and I did this with my sales business and also implementer business, I said, okay, I have no clients. I am 100% salesperson, 0% teacher, facilitator, coach. And so if I have 5 hours to give, because you have a family and I have a family, this is a long-winded answer, but it's detailed. I have a family and I owe them amount of my time. I owe this person who's paying me this amount of time. How much time, and you put this on your VTO and the quarterly, am I going to devote to biz dev every week? Once I started getting clients, I became 5% teacher, facilitator, coach, 95% salesperson. So it helps to divide those in, because a lot of people get stuck in MailChimp, social media, like marketing that feels like you're doing something. And I'll tell you this, the higher ticket price you have, the less effective that stuff is. And so you have to decide for yourself and write it down on paper on purpose, how many hours a week that is right for you, and anybody you influence in your life that requires time from you, kids, spouse, people who pay you, your faith if you have one. But what I say is, I don't care if it's 30 minutes. Devote that to business development that works. And that's the best advice I have.
Excellent, excellent. Clarity is good there and right on point. Similar to where I have that clarity of that 70-30 split right now for this calendar year. Mm-hmm. And as time goes, I'll be able to move it, like you said, 100%, because my 17-year plan, which is 2 cycles on my VTO, so I have a 7-year target and a 10-year target after that. So good. To my retirement. I'm gonna break that down and recognize as I onboard more salespeople in regards to how much time I need to devote to them, and then recognize how much time I have to devote to the client base.
The conversation with them, in my opinion, would not be a time commitment. It would be a value commitment. So how much value are you expecting? And then I'm going to create the smallest viable time frame to get that value that they said they expected, that I'm getting paid for, because they set that. And then therefore I can take the next steps to create more time for myself, because people say time is money. And I'm like, no, time is infinitely more important than money will ever be. And so that's where we would have those clear expectations. So I love that you have that. So now give me your piece of advice. Like, what's the last piece of advice that you would give someone who is trying to grow sales and revenue at their business, or even at an individual level?
I think it would be stay focused on the plan in regards to being able to achieve your goals. I think too many people too often get sidetracked and get stuck in the nitty-gritty things. They're not prioritizing, they're not delegating enough in order to be able to achieve those goals, that plan that they put forward. I think everyone knows we're coming up now to the New Year's. Everybody's got resolutions. Everybody's writing them down.
Yeah.
And then February kicks in and March is around the corner, and then you're July and August and you're like, 1 second.
You said everyone. 20% of people are actually writing it down. That's not everyone.
Okay, so right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
If you're a listener and you're asking yourself, what plan? Take Elie's advice and at least write it down.
Write it down. And then hold yourself accountable. So check into that plan weekly and
put it in a place you can see it, right?
Yeah, somewhere you can see it. Yes.
Some people will check in it weekly. And so we need to stay laser focused. I love that piece of advice. And Zig Ziglar, I'm going to tell him again, bring him out again.
Yeah.
He said, it's not lack of time, but lack of direction that gets people stuck.
There you go.
So I love that that's your piece of advice. Elie, what a pleasure talking to you. I'd love to have you back because there's so much in your mind that I had 1,000 questions about that I wanted to pull. I knew we didn't have time. And I'm like, I'll be honest, I looked at like 35 minutes in. I'm like, oh my gosh, I might not get to the end of this time because Elie has so much value to give. I'd love to have you back.
Great. Barry, it was a real honor and a pleasure to be on. And I'm happy to give it all. That's where my height comes in.
Yeah.
And the more people that I can help and guide and impact is truly what makes me feel great.
So good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.